Let's take a look at some rare heroes that may help you specifically early on in the game, but a few of them do actually hold their ground and are useful even through to the late game. So first we'll look at the gallery and then I'll show you some of the real implementations of these heroes. We'll start with the fighters and we'll go down class by class. Of the fighters, there's a handful that are actually quite good. Naturally, you start with Bora. He is a Lord, so you want to keep hold of him just for his Lord bonus, mainly just because it's 5% stats. It does help early game, but you will be getting Iron on the 7-day login if you haven't already. And he basically is just a superior version of Borat, so there is no real point in keeping Borat beyond that. The knockback effect is not super useful, so in general, I don't really suggest Borat. However, the next hero, Na'vi, I think is really useful. I do use Na'vi quite a bit. She costs 10 to deploy, and she has 2 abilities that generate cost for you. Cost is the resource you use to place heroes. So this is the Na'vi I've been using in most of my runs. As you can see, she is max skilled. It does help out a lot with both of these 2 abilities. So the first one, at max skill, 500 rage cap and 300 starting, and it restores 8 points of cost. Just so you know, it takes about 16-17 seconds for this to charge up the remaining 200 rage, which lines up neatly with her passive, Adventurous, which after 15 seconds she generates 3 cost. So 3 plus 8 is now 11. She's recovered her cost plus 1 after around 16 seconds. You can then despawn her if you like to get 5 cost back. I think she's quite useful to have, especially in the gear raids where it can be really beneficial to try to clear the first waves as fast as you can. Or in the context of gear raid 2, you really need to get your healers out as soon as you can so they can support each other, and then you can go into the first ground shakes as high on health as possible. So I really do like using cost generating heroes such as Na'vi. Another option is this hero right here, Rutu. So his cost generation is not quite as good as Na'vi, it's just his ultimate. You can see the rage cap is a bit higher. The same starting rage, but from 500 max to 620 max. It does give 2 points of cost extra. So he is not quite as good as Na'vi. I would personally prefer to use Na'vi. He does have one thing over Na'vi, which is he has this readiness passive. So when placed, he gets a shield that can absorb 40% of damage. So I think this could be useful in Gear Raid 2. You can chuck him down to absorb some rolling boulders, and that way he can absorb a hit for your team. And maybe he'll survive long enough to get his Battlehorn ultimate available, and then you can despawn him after that. But it's an option. It's something that might help a bit. I do like to use cheap fodder heroes in Gear Raid 2. And his deployment cost is also just 10, the same as Na'vi. While we're on the topic of cost heroes, there are of course 2 epic heroes that do the same thing, which is Cyrene and Dalin. I prefer Dalin personally, and my suggestion for gearing these heroes is please don't build them. They're not really heroes that are going to do a lot of damage. Perhaps Dalin or Cyrene can help you a bit early if you are lacking fighters, but in general these are heroes just there to generate cost, and I would give them the rapidity set. It is a rubbish set. You are not going to get good stats on it because it is only available in the early game, but it will reduce their deployment cost by 1, which just makes it a little bit easier to get your team up and running. So you can either buy these pieces from the Dwarven Association, or you can quickly farm a few pieces in stages 1 to 9 in Gear Raid 2. It's not super worth it. Maybe just buy them from the Dwarven Association when they pop up and leave them on those heroes. So that covers the 2 cost generators that we have available in the rare fighters. There are 2 other heroes I think are worth mentioning. One is Decimus. I think he's just ridiculously good, mainly because of this passive, or entirely because of this passive Defiance. When HP drops to 0, remain alive and continue to fight for 6 seconds. The rest of it doesn't really matter, but afterwards he will die immediately and he cannot be revived, so Valkyra cannot revive him. But with max skill ups, this becomes 8 seconds where he cannot die, and this is really useful in Gear Raid 2. So if I show you my stage 18 auto right now, you will notice that I make use of both of the heroes we've gone over so far. First up, I place Na'vi so I can get some cost generation. Obviously I need healers, I need defenders, but you can see Na'vi's doing okay. She's generating cost, and I'm getting a bunch of cost back. I'm keeping her alive and I'm generating a bunch, which allowed me to get down a defender, 2 healers, and an AoE mage to get damage out. Just before the Earthshake hits, I despawn my Na'vi to get some cost points back. And now I had all the cost I needed, so that after the first Earthshake, I've managed to place my other defender, another healer to support, and then I can chuck down Decimus here to absorb. You see, he just got hit. It was a bit quick, but he was tanking the first round of enemies. He was holding them in place. They killed him. He stayed alive, and then the second boulder rolled and hit him. Now, the second boulder hitting him basically allowed him to absorb the damage, and you can see an ungeared Na'vi doing the same here. So just because of the shielding from Vortex, she's able to stay alive enough to soak some of the damage from the enemies, and it really helps. So I'm just going to do it again just so I can slow it down and show you exactly what was happening with Decimus, as that was a little bit quick. I've got Decimus down here. He's just underneath the play button. He's just been dropped. There are these 2 rolling boulders, and if you go to the monster manual and look at these guys, the Golden Guard, solid impact, they deal a massive damage to the target and the Golden Guard himself. So when this guy collides with Decimus, Decimus is going to get absolutely wrecked. but so is the Golden Guard. And that's really important because these guys actually hit very hard. So you see here, they both collide. Decimus is nearly dead. He just about survives. The Golden Guard is also nearly dead. So now he gets healed. I have 2 healers up, so Decimus is up. But that doesn't matter. He doesn't necessarily have to, but he's still going at the moment. And then you can see he's just about alive long enough that the second one hits him. So now the second one lost a massive amount of health as well. Ideally, Decimus lasts just long enough, so you place it at just the right time, and you ideally keep him alive a little bit longer. So maybe putting some HP percent gear on him, that the boulder hits him and then turns around and resets. And I'll see if I can show you exactly what I mean. So this is stage 16 instead now. Now we have this boulder coming up. We have to make sure the boulder hits us from the front side, and that way he actually runs back. So you see he's been killed by the second boulder, but he's alive long enough that the boulder walks to the front before resetting. Because it's at the front now, if I despawn him, I get the cost back, and then I can chuck down a defender and they die. And that's really the beauty of using Decimus in Gear Raid 2. You can get him to kill 2 of the rolling boulders, the Golden Guards, and that helps so much because those guys actually hit really hard after the impact rolls. So I like to try to do that. I use other cheap heroes as well to cycle in. But Decimus is extra good because his survival, his passive, allows him to stay alive a few seconds longer, and that can make all the difference. So a little bit long-winded, but I think Decimus deserves a bit more of a spotlight. I think he's the most usable late game out of the rare heroes just because of how valuable this Defiance passive is. Aside from that, from the fighters, I haven't experimented with this much myself, but I have seen it used, and I'm going to use it in some of my upcoming videos. Skulf. So the thing that makes Skulf valuable is his ultimate grants an attack boost to 3 allies near him for 10 seconds. But at max skill up, it is a 30% attack boost, which is quite significant. 30% attack boost is quite nice. And the duration will be 15 seconds. So I'm planning to use him in Gear Raid 3 to help with the weaker marksmen, to help them deal damage. So I think he might be valuable for that. There aren't many good attack boosters early in the game. So yeah, I don't know. I don't have much more to say other than that. The rest of his skills seem kind of okay. Again, I wouldn't build him for damage. I would just place him somewhere and try to get him to attack boost my main DPS, and I think that would make a big difference. 30% attack bonus for 10 seconds. You synergize that with a Brienne or a Maul or a Lunaria or a Tariel or a Fiorwin, any of those marksmen. I think it will really help them get through the enemies quicker. So then, moving on, we have the Defenders. Defenders are going to be okay for quite a while. I would not recommend taking any hero that doesn't have a specific niche beyond 5-star personally. Rex is not bad. Rex is okay because, one, he has this AoE stun, and AoE stuns can be quite valuable. It's a 2-second AoE stun. It's quite cheap as well, so he can spam this out. And secondly, he has this Bulwark passive that gives him a shield up to 70% of his max HP. This is really good for Gear Raid 2. You can chuck him down, and with enough time, he'll build up a passive shield to help absorb some of those rolling boulders. So I think Rex is actually quite good for that. Glenn is okay, actually. He does have some good physical damage reduction. It's quite a high amount he can absorb, 40%, and then also his passive will be granting him a 20% magic resistance as well. But it's a very high rage cap, so I don't really rate it all that much. And then you also have Dagna. Dagna seems quite interesting. She's a Lord for the North faction, so she's worth it for the 5% stats. So do keep hold of her until you either get Isolde or King Haas. With her manually activated ultimate, with a fairly reasonable rage cap of 700 at max skill ups, she does reduce physical damage taken by up to 30%, and she will be restoring her own health by 6% max HP per second. So it's quite nice to be able to heal herself and to reduce damage taken, and it increases her max HP as well. So it's not bad. It can help with Gear Raid 2, but the damage is really bursty in Gear Raid 2, so yeah, it's tricky. It is a lot of healing though, so it can actually help. If you're lacking defenders really badly, you can mess about with it, but again, I would recommend 5-star at the maximum, ideally 4-star just to progress. And then another passive, every 30 seconds, though down to 26, she can restore 50% of her max HP. So it's not reliable because it's on a timer that you can't control, but it's nice, it's extra healing, so she has some really good self-sustain. But yeah, ideally you want to go for more stat-heavy heroes such as these epics if you can. Next up we have the Marksman, and there really are only 2 interesting ones here in my opinion. I think because everyone gets a free epic marksman, either Brienne, Tariel, Fiorwin or Tazira, I don't really suggest building Maureen or Amale or even Drogo. They all have their interesting niches. Drogo does hit massive amounts of AoE at the same time. His base stats aren't great. 2.2k is not incredibly low, but it's not particularly good, and we can't see the multiplier here. So I don't think Drogo is particularly valuable to use. In general, you don't really want to use rare heroes for their damage output. So there are 2 sort of exceptions to this. Kook is one. You can use him for his damage output because it's poison. Poison is 1% max HP per second. and it stacks up to 3 times. So it can be 3% max HP per second, which can be a big deal. It can actually help a lot. So Cuke is actually not a bad option. He can help a significant amount, in guild boss especially. If you're going to use Cuke, I would suggest giving him enough health that he doesn't die in guild boss, because he will die to the dragon fire, the meteorites and all that stuff. And you do want to skill him up so that he can apply as much poison as possible. So I'm still missing 1 on him. Aside from that, you do want to get him in attack speed and rage regen gear, just so he can get his shots out as frequently as possible. So you want to pump as much attack speed into the guy as you possibly can. And yeah, generally you just want to keep him alive beyond that. So I would gear him something like this, just the whirlwind set, give him some attack speed subs, try to get as much attack speed as you can, and then take an attack speed main on his amulet, give him some rage regen on his ring, and then ideally, hopefully he stays alive. He might be too squishy at just 4-star, so maybe 5-star is okay. But don't invest in him too heavily. He's not a damage dealer with his individual attacks. It's just the poison application that makes him good. So where can you use him? Obviously, guild boss is a great location for him because the boss is going to have a lot of HP. Aside from that, you can use him in sustained DPS arena or single target arena especially. Single target arena focuses on 1 to 2 enemies usually. They're very tanky. They're very slow to kill, especially in the lower tier of arena. So if you're newer to the game, you don't have loads of legendaries or you don't have loads of like purpose-built teams, then Cuke can actually do a really good job. He's not going to do a great job in actual airborne stages because there's too many enemies, and the same for the group stages. So you can use him in artifact material raid as well if you have a really good defender that can just tank the boss by himself. So you can get your normal damage dealers to obviously try to eviscerate the boss, but then Cuke is going to be applying a lot of poison, which will help quite a bit as well. Obviously you're lacking your healer if you're doing this, so you're kind of really banking on this poison getting through the boss fast enough. So it is a bit risky. It's not ideal. But we'll see how he compares to Salazar, one of the best single target DPS in the game. So I mean, that's a pretty good showing, right? Salazar did 2.7 mil with an ultimate, and Cuke was not far behind on 1.4 mil. So if you can find a way to cycle defenders, use an Olag because of his massive self-shielding, or you know, whatever else you can come up with, maybe use a Meriel so that you can heal your defender, it can work. Cuke can help you kill the boss a bit faster, so you may want to consider that if you're trying artifact material raid and you're really struggling. It is some extra early damage, and this won't matter if you have power of dominance on or not, as it is a percentage of the boss's health. So Cuke has some really interesting uses. He does deal a reasonably decent amount of damage, especially when dealing with bosses or enemies with a lot of health. So next in the marksman tier is Elucus. Elucus is a CC focused marksman. He does a lot of slowing effects. Pretty much all Elucus does is slow things down, but really well, really effective at it. So his basic attack is a 50% slow for half a second, 1 target, so not fantastic. He does have a passive Ruthless Pursuit, and this at max skill ups, which you should want if you're going to use any rare. They're cheap as hell, so there's no reason not to. Each attack condenses the power of Frost. After every 5 attacks, so every 6th attack, the next attack will boost attack by 30% and attack speed by 80 for 7 seconds. The attack speed bonus is really the important part. It just allows him to churn through his slow arrows more often, and he can get more of these slows out to grind the enemies to a halt. But also it gets his rage up for his ultimate sooner, so he starts with it available, just instantly ready to use. And making attacks does passively generate rage for you, so attack speed does help him get his rage up sooner. And his ultimate Ice Blast arrow fires automatically. It deals some damage to 10 enemies, but it also slows them. It also slows them by 50% for 15 seconds. 15 seconds is a very long duration on a slow. It's exceptionally good. So where can you actually use Elucus? Personally, I prefer to use Mary in most places over using an Elucus. I think her CC is better than relying on this slow. And everyone gets Mary on the day 3 login as well. Additionally, her slow lasts for longer and is 75%. He has a much longer range when shooting forward than Mary does, and he doesn't have the heavy freeze. So I'm not a huge fan of using Elucus personally, but there are some places where he can be beneficial for sure. For example, you can use him in the Mage Insignia trial just to slow things down and to buy you some more time in conjunction with a Mary, and it's also going to be proccing any curse benefits, the Curse Lords. So their slows are not really going to stack. Marys will override Elucus's, but there's a lot of enemies coming through, so it is nice to get a bit more time to deal damage. You'll also see Elucus a bit in some of the anti-air arenas. I think Mary is more dominant just because her slows are a bit stronger and her ult is better. But Elucus can be used instead of a Mary in these scenarios. So there are some places where you can use Elucus, but I don't think he's quite as good as a Mary. But sometimes you can use them in conjunction. So moving on from the marksman to healers. There are 2 main healers I think are pretty interesting to use, especially in the early to mid game. But at the very early game, Camille is of course someone you get as a starting hero, and her healing is pretty good. She has massive nuke heals with Mega Heal, The Holy Word Shield is actually very valuable, so Camille is a very good early game healer to use. There's not too much to say other than she's just a good healer until you get hold of some epics, and even when you do get hold of some epics, she can hold up pretty well. I would take her to 5-star at maximum, though she's not going to hold up end game. So there are 2 rare heroes that you can use as supporting healers, and that is Nunea and Autumn. So Nunea, she has a standard heal to 1 ally in range, scaling off of attack, but the main thing is Euphoria. She grants an attack boost of up to 15% of max skill ups for 15 seconds. So it's 15 seconds of 15% attack boost to all allies within her range. Her range is going to be, if you go to hero details and max level, it's this range. So it's pretty good. It's a bunch of heroes. It's not just free random like Skolf's is. It is half the amount of attack boost though, but it does give some defense increase, which can help your defenders stay alive as well. And it's 20% defense boost. I do think that Skolf's is better, and I do think that Autumn is probably better as well, but there is something to be said for attack boost, so it's worth trying or dabbling with if you need some extra damage, especially in places like Gear Raid 1. Nunea can help a lot. I used her in my Lightlock video for stage 13, so I think Nunea is not a bad option. She can boost some stats, which is pretty good. And last for the healers, we have Autumn. So Autumn has 2 main things. Her basic attack heals everyone in range. These types of healers, they scale much worse on their healing stats. So Autumn will gain less from attack stat into her healing, like the conversion rate. The scaling is lower than a single target healer or a tri-healer. So you have to keep that in mind. She's not really going to be a very good healer, and it's the reason why Dolores is not a very good healer either. Her Gold Maple's boon, it increases the crit damage to all allies in range, excluding the caster because it doesn't matter for her. And the increase is up to 60% for up to 20 seconds. That's pretty good. 20 seconds of 60% crit damage is quite nice. Now the problem is, early game you're not going to have high enough crit rate for this to be very useful. However, with Wrath of the Maple and max skill ups, this is a 30% crit rate increase. So assuming you've managed to get yourself around 50% crit rate on your main DPS, which is fairly reasonable if you're focusing on gearing them, that's not bad. 30% will boost you up to 80% crit rate. With 60% crit damage increase, it can help quite a bit. And this is mainly, again, going to be used in Gear Raid 1. You'll pop this alongside a Dolores or even alongside a Nunea, and you'll pop all of your Mage's ultimates so you can get as much damage burst out at once as possible. So Autumn's main use is going to be in Gear Raid 1. There's probably a few other places you can try to use her, but really it's going to be the windows where you need to do as much damage as possible in 10 to 20 seconds. And that's Gear Raid 1. You need to peel the enemies off the wall as soon as you can. So Autumn is quite good for that. You don't need to build her, you don't need to gear her, you don't need to awaken her or any of this stuff. Her main use is the ultimate and this passive, and they don't scale on anything. It is a fixed amount, either 30 to 60% crit damage and between 10 to 30% crit rate. So she doesn't need any stats. As long as she's alive, you're good. And finally, moving on to the mages, we do have Nero. He is another lord for the cult faction. He will grant you 15% more damage to slowed, stunned, frozen and immobilized enemies. So Mary helps a lot, and you can actually use a Lucas to help trigger this as well. He does also grant 5% stat bonuses, so it's not bad. It's actually a decent increase to just have him around. I wouldn't actually place him because his cost is 29, and he doesn't do anything incredible either. So he costs a lot and doesn't do amazing damage, so I would not really place Nero, but his Lord benefits for Curse are very good, especially for early game Curse teams in Gear Raid 1, and generally just in Gear Raid 1 if you don't have a better Lord. Aside from that, the only standout is of course Voltus. It is worth awakening Voltus because you are using him to deal damage. His awakenings will grant him 50 attack, another 60 attack, and finally 5% crit rate, so it makes gearing him a little bit easier. Early game, when gearing a Voltus, your focus is just as much damage as possible. You shouldn't put him in a salvation set, it's just this has pretty good crit rate and attack on the sub rolls. So I would focus on just getting as much attack on him as possible. And if you're able to get his crit rate up, then definitely do that after the attack. Generally, I wouldn't suggest taking Voltus beyond 5-star. I think 5-star max awakening, max promotion, he can help quite a lot. But ideally, I wouldn't suggest taking him to 6. I have heard people have a good amount of success with him, but even still, it is quite expensive to 6-star heroes, and you want to reserve it for heroes that are going to have a more lasting impact. So if we take him into Gear Raid 13 with Power of Dominance turned off, I should have kept a Nero so I can show you the bonus damage with Mary, but that's okay. So you can see this is a 5-star Voltus. There's nothing fancy going on. He is in good gear. He is in some red gear for sure. So that is worth noting, of course. But he's not 6-star, so he's not going to do a great deal without it. And it is a lot of stats missing. His ultimate does hit a bunch of enemies in range. The slows from Mary would help a lot if I had a faction lord, but I don't want to put Morrigan in the team. But at the moment, it's just him dealing damage. And you can see he's actually contributing a reasonable amount. It's not crazy, but it is some additional DPS and it is a rare hero. So considering what he is, he's not doing a bad job, I think. A lot of Gear Raid 1 is just having as many sources of damage as possible, using Lightlock, using Voltus, using Iona, and trying to make them work together to get as much damage out as possible. So every bit counts towards it, and Voltus does actually contribute a worthwhile amount. Anyway, that's kind of it. I just wanted to give you an overview of some of the rare heroes I would suggest building. I haven't got hold of a Skulf, but I'm going to try and pull him and an Autumn, and I'm going to see if I can use them to help in Gear Raid 3, as I think this is a pretty decent amount of attack boost, 30% attack boost for up to 15 seconds. It is 3 random allies, but in Gear Raid 3 you can quite easily place him in these 2 tiles here. So if you notice the layout, there's always a couple tiles in the center for a fighter, and it's kind of hard to find anyone to place there. So tucking Skulf away here and getting him to boost a couple allies near him would actually be valuable. He does have a cost of 14, so it is a bit wasteful, but perhaps if you have 2 spaces spare on your team, using him and a Na'vi to get cost generation may be worth it in the end. But I'll be working on a Gear Raid 3 video soon and trying to make an early game team to help people progress through it. And if I do get a Skulf soon, then I will of course try to use him and let you know how that goes. Anyway, yeah, I just wanted to quickly go over some of the rares, as people do ask quite a bit. Overall, as a summary, I really do like Decimus. I find him to be very useful in Gear Raid 1. In Gear Raid 2, he is quite expensive at 17, but he has a 18 revival time, 18 seconds of revival. This is something I forgot to mention earlier, apologies, but the short revival time makes him really easy to keep throwing down wave after wave. So Decimus is just super good. Na'vi I quite like, obviously, for the cost generation. I think it helps so much. Cuke, I think, is one of the stars that we overlooked a lot on the Forerunner server because we'd progressed past needing him, so it's easy to forget about it. But he is quite valuable, and I think it's worth considering trying to use him in single target boss scenarios when you just need some additional damage to get through the enemy quicker. And then I would definitely suggest trying Nunea or trying Autumn in Gear Raid 1 just to get some extra damage boosts out. But that's kind of it. The rest of them I think can help in limited uses but are not incredible overall. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Do share in the comments if you have any rares that you think I've missed that are very helpful, or if I missed a use case for one of the rares mentioned in this video. I wish you guys the best of luck. Have a great day. Take care and bye-bye.